Hey guys, welcome back to your second set of notes here for plant tissues and plants. And we talked about our simple tissues last time, so now we're going to look at combining some simple tissues to make different organs and organ systems of a plant, which is kind of cool. So the first complex tissue that we're going to find in the plant's dermis is called the epidermis. Again, think of this like plant skin. It's comprised of epidermal cells. If it were just comprised of the epidermal cells, it would be a simple tissue, but it's a complex tissue because it's also comprised of these cell secretions. And this varies from plant to plant, of course, but they can secrete a cuticle, which is where they secrete this long carb called cutin, and that makes like basically a clear, waxy substance around the outside of the plant. That's good for a variety of reasons. Number one, it protects the plant. If you're an herbivore or a little bug that's trying to eat the plant, you have to chew through this thick layer of wax in order to get the plant, and that can really be a difficult thing for a lot of little bugs to chew through. It'll also control water loss from the plant. It's difficult for water to evaporate through a layer of wax, and so having a waxy leaf will help you survive kind of a tough climate or times in your climate where water is very limited. You can also control your gas exchange through the epidermis because some of these epidermal cells are in the form of guard cells, and guard cells form an opening called a stoma, or if there are many openings, stomata, and the guard cells can close the stoma, and that will not allow water out of the plant, but it will also not allow the carbon dioxide into the plant that it needs for photosynthesis. Or the guard cells can open the stomata, which allows the carbon dioxide in so the plant can do its photosynthesis, but the bad thing is it also lets the water out. So if you're in a dry climate, that can be a negative thing. So they're always balancing these things through their epidermis. The other complex dermal tissue is a periderm. Epidermis, we're talking like the surfaces of herbaceous stems and leaves. The periderm, we're talking more like dicots, trees, shrubs, that kind of stuff. And what you get is this layer called the vascular cambium that basically separates xylem and phloem. As it grows, the xylem gets pushed to the inside, it becomes wood. The phloem gets pushed to the outside. Basically, we can simplify it and say it becomes bark. That's not technically true, but for what the average guy or gal knows about a tree, we'll work with it. It's actually cork cambium, cork cells, and parenchyma cells. And when you combine all of these different tissues, you can essentially get these layers of bark. As it moves out from the vascular cambium, it starts to die, and it can kind of fall off of the tree as these dead cells that we call bark. And that's a protective cover on older stems and roots. You don't find a lot of roots that have too much in the way of bark necessarily, but they would have parenchyma cells that keep them safe. It's really the older stems and trees where we're going to find cork cells and cork cambium cells making this bark. So here's kind of the way it looks. The cortex would be sort of the inside of the plant, and as the cork cambium grows more cork cells, it is going to push the cork cells up and out, and it's going to make the plant grow thicker. That's called secondary growth if a plant is increasing in girth. And that whole region of the cork cambium to the epidermis is all called the periderm, or peri, around, derm, the dermis or the skin, the layer around the plant skin. So with complex vascular tissues, there's xylem and phloem. Of course, you know about these already. Xylem conducts water and dissolved minerals, and it's composed of many different things: tracheids, vessel elements, parenchyma cells, and sclerenchyma cells. And phloem normally runs right beside xylem, and that conducts sugar. And that's composed of sieve elements and sieve tubes, parenchyma cells, and sclerenchyma cells. So that's what makes them complex tissues. These guys are normally going to run together in a vascular bundle because moving water and moving sugar really go hand in hand by some simple diffusion and osmosis allow us to move water up the plant to where there's more sugar and move sugar down the plant where there is less sugar. And so here is a stem cross section. You can see it is a dicot because it's in a ring. In a monocot, vascular bundles are scattered and look like monkey faces. They're very orderly in a ring, and so you know that this is a dicot stem. Inside here, this parenchyma can form this pith, this big hollow space of cells. That's not truly hollow, I guess, but it's ground tissue at any rate. And there's ground tissue out here as well in the pith. Here you have sclerenchyma fibers that are growing out. They can become additional stems, things like that. You have xylem, which are these big white circles in here for conducting water, and then you have phloem on the outside, which is the tubes for conducting sugar. And these guys are side by side. And so this little section right here, I'll try to highlight it with a pen for you if I can do that. This little section right here would be one vascular bundle, like that. And there's another vascular bundle, xylem and phloem kind of working together. And so if this were a tree, I'm not sure if it is, if it were, there'd be a vascular cambium layer right here, this red line that would push the phloem out, push the xylem in. As the xylem went in, it would become wood. As the phloem went out, it would become bark. I don't know if that's the case with this particular stem, because I'm not sure what it is, but that's the way that would work. So here's an up-close look at your xylem and phloem together. The xylem tubes are very large. Phloem tubes are quite a bit smaller. The phloem elements, the sieve elements, have companion cells right next to them that support the phloem tube. They also have a sieve plate. If you've ever heard that expression, it's leaking like a sieve. A sieve is the basin with lots of little holes in the bottom. That's where they get the name for a sieve plate. And then here you have the trachid for the vessel element, runs down the vessel. And then you have the cell walls that make up the vessel elements right here. That's kind of a cool up-close look at how plants are conducting water and sugar. Okay, so stems, of course the stem is what's growing above ground, and that's to provide a variety of functions, support the plant, lift the leaves up so they can outcompete other plants for sunlight, lift flowers to a higher height where they're visible to pollinators, things of that nature. Typically your stems are going to have nodes, and a node is a region of growth. For like a branch grows out of a node, a leaf grows out of a node, those give rise to new shoots. Xylem and phloem are organized as vascular bundles, which I had already mentioned. Roots don't normally grow out of nodes. They can with some weird like horizontal stem kind of work, but most of the time roots just grow out of what's called a pericycle as the root's growing. So just know that, I guess. Arrangements of xylem and phloem are going to differ between monocots and dicots, like I mentioned earlier. I said this one's not a monocot because it'd be random monkey faces. This is a dicot because they're arranged in a ring. And so that's important to understand. This is a monocot stem, grass, corn, something like that. And its vascular bundles are more densely located towards the periphery and more sparsely in the middle of the stem. But they're really rather random. And if you zoom in on one vascular bundle, it looks like a monkey face with the xylem comprising the eyes and nose, and the phloem making up the forehead, essentially, is what you have there. So that's sort of the way that works, and the epidermis is on the outside here. And then the rest of this is parenchyma tissue or ground tissue. And so they're generally arranged with the mouth is called lacunae. Here I think they're just lumping it in with xylem, which is fine, but lacunae is like a little lake, open space with water in it. And generally the monkey face is going to face in to the stem, so the mouth would be towards the center, and the phloem forehead would be facing the outside of the stem. And so that's the way those are generally going to be organized. On a dicot stem, these things that are going to grow like trees survive multiple years oftentimes, and occasionally they'll leave tree rings as well. They're going to be arranged in a very nice circle. And so we have the epidermis, of course, like we thought we would. We have a pith on the inside, and then this ground tissue cortex here, and then our vascular bundles, which is going to be our xylem and our phloem. And this really does not look very much like a monkey face at all, but it has the xylem on the interior, like we would expect, and our phloem on the epidermis side, or facing the outside. And so a little different design for dicots. Now, not all stems are just growing straight up vertically in the air, lifting leaves. There are a variety of different stems that serve different purposes, and we give them different names because they're just cool variations on the design. One's called a stolon, that you also hear it called a runner, and those are horizontal stems, horizontal above ground stems. Strawberries spread this way, where the strawberry will have one main plant that's growing the flowers and the fruit and the strawberries, and then it will grow stems that run out away from the parent plant. And when those touch the ground, they can grow their own roots. And if this breaks off, that's no big deal. It becomes a brand new strawberry plant and is independent of the plant it came from. Some bad things about it, it's asexual reproduction, so there's no genetic variety in this. It's just really expanding one plant into several plants, or one plant over a larger area. But the benefit is it's very energetically efficient, and it's a cool way for a strawberry patch to take up a large area of ground without having seeds needing to be transferred and deposited into the soil. So that's pretty beneficial. Then there's rhizomes. Rhizomes are underground stems. So these are horizontal stems as well, but they're going to be running underground that grow parallel to the surface. And you'll see this in I think this one's ginger because they're using the rhizome as a spice, but you'll see this in Canada thistle. You know, if you pulled thistle up, a lot of times you don't get the whole root. The Canada thistle stem breaks off a few inches underground, and there is a long rhizome running under the ground that just continues to send up additional Canada thistle shoots, which are ironically called suckers, if the shoots that come up from an underground rhizome. So there's bulbs. The most common bulb that we all know about is an onion bulb. This is actually above ground. The roots of an onion are these little tiny fibrous guys right here that may or may not make it to the onion by the time you get it at the grocery store. And you guys already knew that because we did the lab with the onion roots and it took forever. Then this is above ground. This is part of the stem. And it is encased in layers of these scales. That's what makes a bulb a bulb. And it's energy storage for next year in the onion's life when it would grow another stem that would produce flowers and seeds. We just normally pull it out of the ground before it gets that opportunity and use that bulb as food or flavoring, things of that nature. There's tubers. Tubers are our stem structure, which is kind of cool because our most common example, those are potatoes. So that potato is not a root or a structure off a root, even though it's underground. That's a storage structure that is part of a stem. And we know that because they have nodes. Stems have nodes where new branches come from. Potatoes have nodes that we call potato eyes. Little white things or red things that start to grow out of potatoes when they get too old, those are potato eyes, and those are actually new branches off of that stem for a brand new potato plant. They just happen to be underground. So a tuber is a thick storage structure that forms on a stolon, a rhizome, something along those lines, because the root of the potato is not actually forming the potato. The root just digs down, and then the little stems that branch off form the potato slightly underground. So that's kind of how you get that design. Corms are a little tricky. Corms are a lot like a bulb, but they don't have these nice layers like the bulb had. These are short, thickened underground storage stems, so their job is a lot like a potato, a lot like an onion, is to provide energy for next year, but you don't get layers. You just put a whole bunch of basically polysaccharides, big complex sugars, starch, that kind of stuff in the ground as a corm and use that to grow up next year. And then there's cladodes. I learned these as cladophylls, but I guess they're cladodes now. And this is basically the idea where the leaves have become diversified down into basically a needle, and the stem itself becomes flat and functions like one giant leaf. And so it is a flattened photosynthetic stem that's generally good at storing water, and we're primarily just going to see this in cactus. Prickly pear cactus are pretty abundant here in South Dakota, and I'm sure you've seen these at one point or another, but they don't have leaves. They have a photosynthetic stem, which gets the job done. Okay, so we're going to stop there. That's 2 sections. That's a pretty respectable amount. We will pick up with leaves next time, so thanks for your time.